need them meetings.
All right. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen for Tuesday, September the 1st. I cannot believe that it is already September. Isn't that crazy? The first thing that we're going to do is adopt our agenda for the meeting. I do have one addition. If you would add at 14A, 2 appointees to the Commission on Police Transparency. Those will be our final 2 appointments to that commission. And then Ashley has one thing to add as well.
Yes. We would add a request to declare the timber on the 13-acre piece of property located at the rubbish site. We would like to declare that timber surplus. You know, we got permission to advertise for bids at our last meeting. We would have to declare that timber surplus since we will be.
13-acre what site?
It's the 13 acres of the rubbish site.
Oh, rubbish site.
The rubbish site, yes. Since we'll be actually receiving money for that timber when it's cleared.
And what number is that going to be?
We'll do that at 15A.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, so with the addition of 14A and 15A, are there any other additions that I've missed? All right, then could we get a motion to adopt this agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? A quick mayor's report tonight. I have a really fun project to report on that Kara Giles has named the Shelter Show. Local artist Earl Dismute contacted me about a month ago with a really fun idea of utilizing our bus stops as public art venues all over town. And so I'm really excited. Kara and Earl have both worked really hard on this, and artwork by Sarah Frances Hardy was our first installation, and it was put in today at the bus shelter by the skate park on Bramlett Boulevard. Just this afternoon they installed it. So y'all have to check that out when you go by. And we will have other bus shelters featuring artwork by Ann Scott Barrett, Frank Estrada, and Kara Giles. So we will be putting those in place as the next few weeks roll out. So y'all be sure to go by and look at that. We're really excited about this project and hope that it puts a smile on people's faces because we could all use one. I'll be traveling to Jackson tomorrow for our perhaps final meeting of the Flag Commission. We hope tomorrow to narrow down the choice to the final flag that will be on the ballot in November. So I'm looking forward to that. And tonight we want to recognize one of our officers, Dylan Carmichael. And I'm going to read you this lifesaver recognition. On August 14th, 2020, Officer Dylan Carmichael answered a call of a possible overdose, and the person was unconscious. Upon arrival, Officer Carmichael noticed that the fire department was trying to revive the subject due to their unconscious state and low heart rate. At that point, Officer Carmichael administered 1 dose of Narcan. This allowed the subject to regain consciousness, and the fire department successfully kept the subject stable until EMS arrived. The subject became alert and was transported by EMS to the hospital. Officer Carmichael's quick response was paramount in these life-saving efforts. Officer Carmichael, we thank you for what you do every single day. I know this was particularly important, especially in those circumstances, but I also know that what you do every day is really important. So we thank you for serving our community and for representing us so well. I know that Chief has something for you.
Yes, ma'am. And also for Chief Gardner and his staff, they were there and were instrumental to be able to allow us to even be at this point. So we really appreciate them and what they do in those scenes with us as well. But we do appreciate you, Dylan. Thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, I would ask the board to authorize the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 18th, 2020.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ask you to authorize the approval of accounts for all city departments.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I would ask you to consider the consent agenda, letters A through I.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Request permission to accept a quote for auto and general liability insurance for Oxford University Transit for FY 2021. Donna?
Yes, ma'am. We got 2
two quotes that our brokerage put together. The first option is our current agent, which is RLI, and their bid was $345,952. And then the second option was National Interstate, and their bid was $436,381.
Are you satisfied with the current, I mean, it's a lower
You
bid?
get what you pay for. So, you know, National Interstate was always our insurance person as far back as Oxford Transit has been in service. They would always come and do yearly audits, look at our paperwork, offer lots of suggestions, really good information. We've not seen RLI at all. The other option thing that they've always done is give us our lost accident information and kind of keep us up to date. We had a few little fender benders. It just seems like they take forever to get the claims going and go through. So, no, I'm not really satisfied. The other thing is that we do apply for a multimodal grant every year, and we get our 20% back on our insurance. So, really the cost isn't that big of importance because we get the funds back anyway. So it's just up to you as to what you want to do.
And what is the other company?
National Interstate is the one that is the highest company. RLI was the current one we have now, and they came in lower.
I've had trouble understanding what I mean, our download here was more just a piece of information about McGriff Insurance Services.
So that's our brokerage. So if you look on page 16 of their proposal, it shows the two costs together. So they put together what their proposals are and put the two companies that actually sent a bid in to them. And page 16 is what shows the actual two companies together and what their cost
So
are.
it's almost $100,000 difference. I mean, it's not like it's a small difference. and
Right.
One's better service, so.
But again, we do get that 20% back that the local match is paying through that multimodal grant that I apply for every year. We've gotten it every year, so.
It's still money somebody's got to pay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, board, any other questions, or is there a motion? Move we approve with which? All right, so we have a motion to accept the bid from RLI Insurance.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, request permission to accept the FY 2021 5311 grant contract 503345 for operations and the FY 2021 5339 vehicle grant contract 503430 for vehicles from the Mississippi Department of Transportation for the Oxford University Transit.
So we have two grants. The first grant was for our operation itself, so it's the 5311 grant. The second one is the MDOT put all the vehicles that we may want to purchase in the 2021 year on a 5339 grant, and we sign it. It doesn't mean we have to buy the vehicles. We don't know what we're looking at in the next year or so, but it's up to you whether you want to sign that and go forward and decide later whether we can do the vehicles or not.
So the 5311 is for operations.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to get to the dollar amount.
$3,905,698.
And then 5339 is just for potential new vehicles.
Yes, ma'am, for
And it's
1,451,956.
I move that we give permission to accept both grants.
All right, is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you, Donna. Consider an appeal of the Planning Commission's denial of case 2649, a building height variance for a 5th floor for a property located at 600 Molly Bar Road, being further described as PPIN 5638. Ben? And Jason's recusing himself.
Thank you. Good evening. Paul Coscionino on behalf of Bryan Development requested approval of a height variance in order to construct climate-controlled storage spaces for the Behringer development in what staff has determined to be a 5th floor use. The Behringer has been the subject of 5 previous Planning Commission cases, one of which was a special exception for building height to add a 4th floor, which was approved. The property is zoned suburban multifamily. The approved site plan is for a multi-story. It's 3 residential floors and a ground floor podium parking condominium development, which will have 39 dwelling units with 90 bedrooms on a site that's about 1.75 acres. It's about 98,000 square foot facility with a height of 45 feet and 83 parking spaces. Bryan Development requested a building height variance from the Planning Commission. The request would have allowed the applicant to utilize the already enclosed attic space on the top floor to create conditioned with HVAC storage units for each dwelling units in the development. The requested change, it would not alter the height or the design or the elevations of the existing building. Storage units, they are common in multi-level, multi-unit developments and would provide residents with a place that they can store items in a convenient space outside of the unit. The applicant would like to install 2 sets of restrooms so that residents that are using the already approved unenclosed rooftop facilities or terraces up top on the roof they could use those instead of having to either go down to their unit or to a public facility on the lower level. Staff finds this problematic as the implication of granting the variance would be creating a functioning 5th floor. That means it would be 2 floors higher than what is already allowed in suburban multifamily, which limits building height to 3 stories. However, there is a special exception for a 4th floor when you commit to age-restricted units, so 55 or older. And that was previously granted. While the attic space in a single-family resident is not considered a floor, we believe that to be because it's not conditioned space. And so a lot of people, they do use it for storage or, putting Christmas decorations or winter clothes or things like that. A variance requires evidence of hardship that's not self-created, and it's for situations beyond the control of the applicant. Staff sees no legitimate evidence of any type of hardship, merely the evidence of a desire to provide added amenities for the residents in this development. Perhaps the developer could identify design alternatives that would allow for storage facilities to be located in other elements or other areas of the building. This was considered by the Planning Commission at the August 10th, 2020 meeting. And there was considerable discussion by the commission. Ultimately, there was a motion to deny the request, and that motion passed with a 4-2 vote. We had one commissioner who was calling in remotely, and his call dropped. So it was a 4-2 to approve the motion to deny the request. And so we did receive an appeal letter. And I'd like to go through the elements of that appeal. Point 1, the applicant does not believe that what they are proposing constitutes a 5th floor. Point 2, if a variance is required, then A, they believe that or at least that they want to note that the exterior architecture will not be altered. The approved height of the building does not change. Less than 50% of the unused space will be utilized for storage and bathrooms. Providing bathrooms avoids a hardship of having elderly, those with mobility issues, or young children to descend to lower levels of the building to use other remote bathroom facilities. And the Planning Commission voted 4-2 in support of the motion to deny the request, which clearly shows the applicant made a compelling case to support the variance request for at least 2 of the planning commissioners. I at least just want to walk through how we got to height in terms of, just remind you of how we regulate it. So the prior code, prior to 2017, we just strictly regulated height in terms of feet. But we had instances where buildings were built that were taller than, or at least appeared to be taller than that height limitation. Oftentimes it was 38 feet. And part of that was because of the International Building Code allowed for average grade plane to be considered, and so we had instances where about a 3-story building could be constructed, but we had 5-story buildings that were constructed. So in order to provide some sort of a remedy to that issue, we made the determination of calculating in terms of feet, so the actual height of a building, but then also functioning floors, so we can provide a set limitation of what could or could not be there. So that's ultimately how we came to that. In this instance, the subject property is zoned suburban multifamily, which regulates height to 3 floors, a maximum height of 40 feet. If a development proposal consists of age-restricted multifamily for seniors, then the Planning Commission could consider a request for a 4th floor or 50 feet. That was granted by the Planning Commission in February of 2019, and the site plan was approved with an unenclosed rooftop with elevator access for residents to use. And it's common for an elevator to be provided that provides access to the rooftop. Oftentimes it's for the service of mechanical equipment, air conditioning units and condensing units, hoods that are on top floor. Chancellor's House would be an example of having that access. There are several examples of that, but with minimal development that takes place on that floor. The appeal letter questions whether there is a need for a variance. Mr. Koshanina contended that the interpretation to classify this use as attic space, this use of attic space as a 5th floor appears to be driven by the applicant's desire to condition, the heat and cool of the storage facility and the bathroom areas within the attic area. And then he also noted that the intended uses within the existing attic space are apparently allowed if this space is not conditioned. Well, the Land Development Code defines a story as the portion of a building other than a basement included between the surface of any floor and the ceiling next above it, right? And so, I think it's one thing if you have a hallway, an elevator that brings you to that top floor that provides somebody with access to the mechanical equipment or the approved unenclosed rooftops. But then when you start putting in functional uses, I think the conversation is really changing, like in this instance.
So you're saying you don't think it's strictly because of the functional use and not because it's air conditioned?
I think that's, the hallway I think was presumed to be air conditioned, but I think it's reasonable to say that you have that hallway that's conditioned that still provides you that access to the rooftop. But now when you start modifying that attic space to be a much larger area and having that condition with the uses, I think that definitely changes what they were originally proposing, making it a functional floor. In July of 2019, the applicant submitted a site plan modification for consideration by the Site Plan Review Committee. In that submittal, the architectural floor plan submitted indicated a similar proposal for storage units, bathrooms, 2 kitchens, and those submitted plans indicated an overall 5th floor by the architecture firm of the applicant. After staff questioned this, we informed the applicant that we could not support the amendment, and in order for that to be proposed, they would have to seek a variance for building height. Ultimately, they removed those elements. They were approved for the site plan modification, and then we're at today. So I think at the August 2020 Planning Commission, Mr. Koshanina noted that it's the applicant's view that if there was a proposal for a commercial use like a restaurant or additional dwelling units, then that would certainly change the discussion, but not with the storage units that were to be used by the residents there. And we believe that, the Land Development Code determines what uses are there, and if you can have one use, then you should be able to have all of the use. We can't pick and choose what we seem to think is acceptable and not. If the code allows for it, then you could have the luxury of those uses. Commissioner Gray did inquire if it was possible for storage to be provided if the attic space is not conditioned. And I think my response is still the same. I think it's reasonable for a development, a building to use the attic space for the purposes of storage even if it's not conditioned. I don't think it's unreasonable for an existing development to store Christmas decorations for the lobby, filters, just ancillary items inside of that attic space. I think that's a little bit different than what they're proposing here. They're proposing individual storage units for the purposes of the restaurant, not necessarily storage or using the eave space for just kind of hiding a few things like I do in my attic, at least with my Christmas decorations. We do acknowledge that the approval of this variance will not alter the exterior architectural elevations or the previously approved building height, but we do believe, as previously stated, that it changes the function. I think this is because it's no longer a space that provides access to the mechanical equipment on the rooftop or the approved unenclosed rooftops. And so in conclusion, we stand by our previous recommendation. We stand by the Planning Commission's decision to deny the variance request. We do understand that the amenities would be, I think, very convenient for the people that choose to live at this place. But we don't necessarily see a hardship that is necessary for granting this variance. If the board would like for us to evaluate the building height in suburban multifamily to potentially consider taller buildings, perhaps a 5-story building in suburban multifamily, that's something that we can certainly do. We can evaluate it, bring it back before a work session or the ordinance review committee. But I at least wanted to present that as an additional option.
Okay, Rick, did you have a question?
Several things. So, let's say you got a split level high-rise going on here, and you could end up with 8 floors. And I mean, I don't have a problem in my mind if we set the building height here, they end up with 8 floors, 12 floors, or 4 floors, as long as we aren't going over our building height. I don't know, in my mind.
In terms of feet and floors? Or are you saying strictly?
Feet, more than anything. I mean, that's what everybody sees from the outside. I mean, we're telling, in my mind right now, we're saying, yeah, you can build it, just no air conditioning. I mean, basically, we're saying you can do what you want to do, just no air conditioning. The height is the same on the building, whether they air conditioned or not. That's just the way I look at it. I've stayed in many places around where they had split level floors, and this house looked like a 3-story house, although it has 6 levels because it started here and went here and then there and there and there. I think we're looking at floors where we should be looking at height. And also functionality, just because it puts AC in it, instead of it just being a plain storage, like in my attic. I mean, but you see more and more buildings that will be air conditioned in their attic, just because it saves on everything down below. It's just what I've seen lately. So I'm just looking at houses. That's all I've got to say. I just don't see any problem with it.
Do you have any issue with the AC in the restrooms if the storage wasn't conditioned?
I mean, we have not supported either of the requests, the bathrooms or the storage. We think that ultimately it's a use and it exceeds that height limitation as we have defined it for floors. And, we have concerns about the potential ramifications of other developers coming back and saying, well, now we can build out our attic space if this is no longer a floor. We've met the height requirement, so let's build out that attic space, eave space into an additional unit or into another use that's allowed within the code, maybe a restaurant, maybe something to that effect. So I think to answer your question, yes, I think we do have an issue for the reasons that it would be an additional floor.
And I want to make sure I understand this correctly. I'm not positive that I do, but my understanding is that they were already granted a special exception for a 4th floor,
Correct.
right? Okay, and so now that would be an additional floor being granted. So what we've said that we are okay with is 3, and I keep going back to I remember the project that drove us to being very cautious about how we figured height and how many floors, and that I see what you're saying, but I just remember the project that drove us to say, we got to get a handle on this, because this is, are we doing it by elevation or by stories or by feet or by, and what I don't want to see is numerous buildings that we all know have gone down and are about to come back up and on different lots. I look at it kind of like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, our height requirement around the square was 35 feet. And we had like 6 requests in a row for 38 feet. So we said, okay, clearly we're okay with 38 feet. Let's change the ordinance to meet what we're okay with so that we are not having to do that all the time. I mean, I think if we're okay with a fifth story, then I think we're gonna get that question a lot with all the building that's going on. The use of this is not really what concerns me as much as opening the door for, we've already given an exception for a fourth floor, and now we're talking about a fifth.
But what do you say about Rick's argument that you could have 7 floors if they're all split level? I mean, to me, it goes back to the height. Yeah, I mean, it's like, what do you consider a split level house? 2-story, 3-story? I mean, what?
Whatever the highest portion is.
But that's where he's at. I mean, I guess I'm catching what he's saying in two different ways. He's saying the height of the stories or the height with the
Are not
stories
over.
or whatever, and I'm like, okay, it's either the height or it's the stories. We have to decide. We can't say you can have this height with, okay, you have to have 14-foot ceilings.
Well, we're talking about stories, though. That's what the code covers for this suburban multifamily.
But he's already okay with the height of the building. It's already okay.
Because the so-called fifth floor was an attic, and now it's not an attic anymore. They're proposing something that is another floor because of the amenities that they're wanting to put in there.
But it's
That's still considered an attic, though. I mean, I've been in clients' houses that has put the spray foam insulation in their attic, and they condition it, and it's unbelievable. Some of them are conditioned and some of them aren't, and it's unbelievable how comfortable those attics can be in the summer.
Have you ever been to an attic with restrooms?
Attic where?
An attic with restrooms?
The restrooms are a hallway, so, and I know that the restrooms are a question, but if the terrace is already approved, it makes sense not to make them go downstairs to bathrooms. So I don't have a problem of it being used as storage. I would have a problem of it being used for additional residents.
Once it's conditioned and built out, I don't think we can tell them what they can use it for. Once we allow it to be built out and conditioned, we can't say what it can be used for.
I think if we do a special exception or a variance, you can tie that to the use.
and could possibly tie it to the actual deed. I don't know.
Poe, what is your, who's going to check that in 10 years? Yeah.
Yes, you can, the problem is policing. You
Yeah,
can grant a variance that says they put bathrooms up there, but nobody can ever reside up there, and one of the requirements of the variance is we're allowed to check it once a year or whatever. Y'all can put that on there.
We don't.
Part of what they're
conflict with it.
representing to you is we're not gonna use it for residential space.
If they ever want to use it for residential, they have to come back and pull permits to do any
They would pull
modifications.
permits, they would have to, we would have to definitely take a look at it.
But the design of the building, whether we say okay to the bathrooms or to the storage units, is the same. The outside, of the building, everything's equal. Is that correct? Right now?
Yep.
Okay, all we're doing is saying you can add storage units in the attic space. And I guess bathrooms.
And bathrooms.
I know that we're worried about precedence, but in my mind, this is kind of what variances are for, is to be able to allow things like this, especially when they don't go over the height of what they already are, so.
But they already got a variance for a fourth floor.
This is a different variance. This is not a height variance.
So tell me, Ben, give me those height comparisons. Is there a height?
So when they were approved for the special exception for a fourth floor,
Yeah,
the limitation was 50 feet.
okay.
So they've complied with that the 4 floors and 50 feet.
It was like 46, 48 or something.
5 feet, they were 5 feet under, right? They're at 45.
I think that's right, Mark.
So they're not changing that it's just space.
Because the fifth floor was going to be built out exactly like this, Ben, so the only difference is whether or not it can have air conditioning in it?
Yeah, I think what's really helpful
Doesn't
when you
seem to
look
make
at.
sense to me. Why did we not why do we not call it a fifth floor then? I'm confused at why it's, why is it allowed?
Why was it allowed at all?
Well, I think because it was within the height limitations and it was a rooftop. It had an elevator that got you up and it was a hallway. So when you look at this exhibit that I provided you with a printed copy, it shows you what was previously provided, previously approved, and what they're requesting now. And what you see on the left is an elevator with a hallway that takes you to the rooftop patios, the terrace, which is allowed. You're allowed to use a rooftop with certain limitations. And so you can see that everything else up there is just attic space. It's
Right.
just the eaves. And now when you look on the right, you see that they've now decided to build out, you know, so I don't necessarily see this as a floor. I think that this is access to the rooftop, the rooftop, period, with a hallway. And I think over here now, when you start building out and providing uses within that whole floor, I think that changes the intended use.
Does it change the roof line at all? When I thought, I guess the way I was picturing it is that there were these elevators and this hallway. So where you've got written attic on both of these, that roof line that will be over that area
Yes,
will
ma'am.
be the exact same in both approved and proposed.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean,
Well,
so
that's hard to-
just double check. Everything on the left is exactly what's on the right, except you just added some storage units that are air conditioned inside the original.
Like the
structure.
walls, where the walls are?
Right.
Yeah, yes.
Feels to me like something's wrong with our code then.
That's,
You know, I just, because it doesn't feel right to allow that to happen. It doesn't feel right to grant a 5th floor when you've already gotten a variance for a 4th floor. To me, it doesn't, but what I'm hearing is nobody's gonna know the difference between the two. I didn't realize it was the exact same build
It
out.
looks the same, it all looks the same, but I think it's used differently. So I think a lot of times you see just a simple elevator penthouse that gets you to the roof. When you look at, when you go to the top of the Chancellor's house,
Yeah.
there's a little vestibule that you step off of the elevator. It's enclosed and it's a small space. So I don't see that as a floor. I view that as access to the rooftop. I think these are design aesthetic elements to the roof as it was previously approved is a design, an aesthetic to to make this, give this a residential feel. It's not a flat parapet roof. It is a pitched roof. And before, as it was previously approved, it just had a hallway. So that vestibule is effectively the same thing, but it gets you to both ends of the roof line. And now they're proposing to modify that enclosed area and put in uses and make it functional space.
So if, I'm trying to, my concern is that we gave a variance for a 4th and now we're giving a variance for a 5th. That concerns me because we've got so many other buildings going up that if I'm them, I would come and ask for the same thing. So, but if they can already build a 5th floor, then what are we doing?
everything's equal, and what we got is somebody that thought, hey, let me use this space instead of just going to waste. I mean, I wish I would've done that in my head.
Poe, what were you
Well,
gonna say?
Mark, who's been on the planning commission, may be able to address this, but there is a rational reason that the code speaks to floors as well as heights. That's what y'all are sort of talking about. And the reason is you can stuff more people in if you make a functional floor, as Ben keeps saying, and on your, out of what otherwise would not be a functional floor, would be no more than an attic space.
Okay, that makes sense.
When they granted a 4th floor, they acknowledge they give them more density.
30 more beds.
Space,
Yeah.
more, and now they can move more into what our planning department believes is a 5th floor because of the build out. And our code doesn't just speak to height, it speaks to height and floors. If y'all wanna change that and say you don't mean to speak to floors, as long as the outside facade doesn't go over a height, we don't care how many people go in or how low your ceilings are, then I think y'all can do that. I do think though, you got to give a reason, a hardship, that your current ordinance doesn't allow a floor to be made out of, or decide that you disagree with your planner and his assessment that storage and 4 restrooms and air conditioning make that a functional floor. And you could disagree with that and make the finding that there's a hardship that exists that requires variance. But I think that's the issue that you've got.
I guess that's where I'm looking at that, is just, it's still an attic space. It's not a residential floor, it's still attic. There's no residence. If they were coming back and saying, we redesigned this and we think we can squeeze in 6 more units in the attic space, I wouldn't support it at all. But all you're taking, this gets back to my common sense. It's already an attic space, it's already there. Nothing's changes on the use of that attic space, except the bathrooms, which I think, considering it's a 55+ units, I think that makes sense for the terrace operations or the use. And the rest of it's whether it's attic space, it has cubicles to safely store your goods, or whether it's just an open attic space. I mean, it's not, to me, it doesn't change the use, and I think we're getting hung up on calling it a 5th floor or calling it an attic. I still think it's an attic. I mean, if you look at Oxford Square North, they have storage in their basement. It's still a basement.
Does the roof line provide for it to be built out into a living facility, or does the roof line, is it you said it was a pitched roof, so is it, my concern would be 10 years from now, is it?
Yeah. Or can it be changed into like a ballroom or?
I think it's certainly tall enough. I think absolutely it's tall enough that it could be used for any other use, residential unit or a ballroom.
But I think they've represented to you all what they want to use it for. They put that as part of
They
their
did.
variance request. Y'all can grant a request for that purpose only when you grant a variance, and say, if that's the hardship and it's based on 55+ use only, and you're gonna grant it only limited to the uses they request, not to further uses for anyone, but based on your decision that it is indeed an attic and it'll be used only as an attic, y'all can add that condition.
That's my point on a variance, is we can put restrictions with that
Yeah,
variance.
I think that's important,
You
yeah.
know, and one of the problems I think with the code is when you start putting people up there on a terrace, you're already giving it another use, other than just going up there to deal with the mechanical things, and, that's a use that people are actually doing up there. So, we might want to look at that in the code, if we want to ensure that an attic is an attic and not another, a recreation floor.
Not an entryway to a recreation floor.
Yeah,
We're
We
looking
can.
at it that way, but this one's already been granted. I just look at it as, I think your architects/engineers are thinking out of the box.
well, they've got porches and screened-in porches in the residential units, and I don't know that rooftop terrace stuff is necessary.
But that's already approved, this is just whether or not they can,
Yeah, but I'm talking about,
that's the thing to me, if it is only utilized for what they're saying it will be utilized for, then you're not gonna see any difference.
yeah, and it concerns me that initially they wanted a kitchen up there. So if we do grant this with conditions, we're gonna have to keep an eye on it, I imagine.
You bet.
Any more building, they've got to come back for a different building permit.
I-
They add, I hope.
Yeah, you would hope.
I'll make a motion to exactly what both was saying. I've got to add in all that, legal language and make sure that it is used, especially for what their permits are asking for. I'll second.
All right, those in favor? Those opposed?
Nay,
Preston, I didn't hear which way you voted.
I think you said aye.
Okay, great, then the motion passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Next is to discuss the current Serving Oxford Safely plan. And although I don't have any proposed changes for the plan tonight, certainly any of you that would like to propose one certainly can. I've asked Jimmy to give us an update on the numbers and where we are, as we always do when we discuss the plan.
You all got a copy of the numbers. There's one on the screen. The state did not have their bar chart ready to show from last week's data. So what went is what today's numbers are with the Lafayette County total 1,470. We've had a total of 36 deaths, unfortunately, and 34 new cases. If you'll look at the chart over the past 7 days.
Can we get Bailey? Oh, there.
Yeah.
I didn't see because you were in front of him, I'm sorry.
We've had a total of 292 new cases in the past 7 days. And as of yesterday, we've got 325 active cases in the community that's being reported. Below that is the university dashboard. It's a site that the university has started giving up-to-date information on the university statistics. Right now, they're reporting 290 active cases. 280 of those are students. If you go down, it shows you how many they've got in isolation, how many in quarantine, 29 in isolation, 57 in quarantine. 16 on-campus housing units are affected by the virus, with 4 campus programs being affected. One of the positive notes, though, for the entire state is there's a new value, well, not a new value, but a value that we haven't brought up before. It's called the R0 value, and that's the value. The easiest way to explain that is if someone has the virus, how many people are you going to transfer that virus to? And if it's over a 1, then you have active transmission going on in the community. You're not reducing your transmission. If you're under a 1, then your methods and work you're doing is reducing the transmission of the virus. Right now, for the state of Mississippi, we're at a 0.86, where several weeks ago we were at 1.6. So the methods and actions we're taking are working to reduce the spread, according to the data.
So you see that Mississippi's the second.
And that's the second page right there. We're number 2 in the country. There's only one other state that has a lower R0 value than we do.
So I wonder if it were done for Lafayette County, what that number would be.
That's curious and everything. We've got the correct information if we could find somebody that would calculate it for us. I've looked at the calculation, and that's above my pay grade.
I'm sure it'd be higher because of all the influx of the students we just got.
I remember when we were concerned when we would have like 13 cases in a day.
I know.
And now, we've just been,
Just hold our breath every day.
We stand on test results as far as are they improving? Are they still running 6, 7 days from testing?
They seem to be getting better, and I think that's one reason that the numbers are higher is that we're getting the test results back quicker. Looking at the active case list, we're not seeing those 3, 4, 5 day delays as much. That when we get the active case list now, like today for September the 1st, then we're seeing that their quarantine period is going to the 9th, 10th, and 11th, which means the results are only 2 or 3 days behind, instead of being 7, 8, 9 days behind.
and the mayor extended everything for 2 weeks.
The governor actually extended everything for 2 weeks, but our resolution was still in place even when his expired at 8 a.m. because we have said that ours is in place until we determine it's not any longer. We don't have an end date on our requirement right now. So, but yes, he has extended his, he only made one change in his latest resolution or executive order, which was to allow 25% capacity at high school sports events. That was the only change that he made, other than extending all the rest for 2 weeks.
Mayor, I thank Jimmy for coming up here. I don't have any changes that I want to make on what we got going on right now.
Does anybody?
No, I think we're doing well.
Well,
I mean, as well as we can.
That's right.
What we have control over, we're doing well.
that's right, the parts we can control, and a huge thank you to Oxford Police Department, who continues to help us, along with Jimmy, in enforcing the, I think, very effective plan that we have in place. Just encourage everybody to hang with us. I know it's been a long time. I know that the masks are miserable. I know that it's hot outside, but I do believe that it is what keeps the light on at the end of the tunnel. So we thank you for continuing to hang with us on that. Okay, next on our agenda is a budget hearing for fiscal year 2020-2021. Do we know if we have anybody that was not able to get into the courtroom that was here to speak or to hear anything about the budget hearing? Okay. I just don't know. Several people had said they wanted to speak, and so.
We're checking downstairs also.
Okay, thank you. Wait just a second, let's make sure, so.
I'll wait to get started.
Nobody's downstairs to speak? Okay, all right, Ashley, go ahead.
Well, this is gonna be very brief. When we started our budget process this year, in the climate that we're in, everybody was pretty cautious about what we were gonna do, and the mayor and board, expressed that to our department heads, and most of our department heads came in with a budget that was either flat or much lower than what they had asked for in previous years. Not a whole lot of wants, but a bunch of needs. Just as kind of an overview, our budgeted revenue for the upcoming year is down 7% from our current year. Our fiscal year 1920 revenue was $33.2 million. Our budgeted revenue for next fiscal year 2021, is $30.9 million. Our budgeted expenses this year and this current year are $36.8 million, and our projected budgeted expenses for next year are $36 million. So down about 2%. There will be no tax increase, which is, I guess, the main idea of the whole budget.
I repeat.
There will be no tax increase at all. In fact, our mill rate remains the same, along with the school's mill rate remaining the same. So everything is pretty much flat flat or down from the previous year. So pretty we've
Yes.
some small projects that we had to do rebudget, but pretty much no new.
And the board has spent, and department heads have spent untold hours on for getting us to this point in the budget. And another thank you to Ashley and Bart and Braxton, who have worked so hard to get this budget together. And thank you to all of our department heads who understood the financial pinch that we are in, and really helped to shave down as many expenses as we could this year, resulting in our budget being down this year. So I thank them. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the budget or has any questions, as this is a public hearing? No one? All right, any questions for Ashley from the board?
And we'll adopt this at our next meeting. We are still kind of error checking, making sure there are no errors, but for the most part, we'll adopt it at our next meeting.
Perfect, thank you, Ashley. All right, at this time, I will ask you to authorize the reappointments to the Pathways Commission for Don Vitale and Roger Coonley. All in favor? Any opposed? Well, I ask you to authorize a reappointment to the Courthouse Square Historic Preservation Commission of Stuart Poval.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? On our Historic Preservation Commission, we have two members whose terms have expired, Sarah Frances Hardy and Kathy Allen. And I just want to publicly say, although they're not here tonight, how much we have appreciated the time and energy and effort that they have both put into this Historic Preservation Commission. And we have one member who will be reappointed, if you so wish, Virginia Lukenbach. I would ask for you to reappoint her.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? And then I would ask you to appoint in Sarah Frances Hardy and Kathy Allen's spots, Jolie Nichols and Blair Hobbs are recommended for your appointment.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we have two slots that remained open in our Commission on Police Transparency, and tonight I would recommend to you Talbert Toole and Jack Hall for those last two spots. They are both willing to serve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right. At 15, request permission to declare equipment in the Development Services Building Department surplus and authorize its disposal. Is Chris?
The Chris Carter's old cell phone, sorry.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? At 15A, we added the timber issue, so that is declaring timber on 13 acres of the property that will be used for the landfill surplus. Do we have a motion to do that? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, Chief, request permission to declare equipment surplus in the Oxford Police Department and authorize its destruction.
That's gonna be expired vests and old vehicle equipment.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right, request permission to accept a grant from the Mississippi Office of Highway Safety for 405D alcohol and drug impaired driving training coordination for 2021 in the amount of $580,345.08.
This is our annual grant that we do through the highway safety, and there's no match on that.
All right.
So moved.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Chief. Third reading and vote on a proposed ordinance amending Chapter 18, Section 18-71, definitions to add subsections A through D and to add sections 18 through 78, keeping of vicious dogs to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Oxford, Mississippi. Pope.
I don't have anything to add from the last meeting. The changes that we made were just, as discussed at the public hearing, and they were relatively minor. What was the final insurance? I'm trying to.
$100,000.
$100,000 insurance if you choose to keep a vicious dog.
Yeah, and there were no other changes, but I do want to point out that since our last meeting, we've had an incident of a dog bite and very problematic. And I'm going to make a motion that we approve this ordinance change, and that because of public health and safety, that we waive the 30-day wait on it and make it effective immediately.
All right, that is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any questions or comments before we vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Request permission to advertise and conduct a reverse auction for a dump truck for the Oxford Utilities Water and Sewer Division. Rob.
Thank you. Good evening. As the item clearly states, we are seeking to purchase a dump truck for Water and Sewer Division. We have it in our fiscal year 20 budget, and we've also included it in our fiscal year 21 budget, you may remember. The reason is because we delayed the purchase due to the pandemic, and so we would like to go ahead and get that ordered. We think it's going to take a few months to get it in once we order it.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Rob. All right, request for variance of lift station enclosure buildings at Eastover and Owens Place, also known as Bell Rivers 2. Rob?
Yes. So this item deals with a variance request made by developer Stuart Rutledge at Owens Place and Eastover, two of his developments for affordable housing. And you may remember at Bell Rivers, you granted a variance from the city specification that requires a building over the lift station. He is seeking to design two similar lift stations at these two developments and would like a variance of the building requirement over the lift station. And he can give you the reasons he would like to not build those buildings, but in our current code and in the requirements that he got approved through the Mississippi Department of Health, it was specified that a building would be built over the lift station to, I guess, provide protection of the equipment. And that's typically what's installed at our lift stations. But we have a number of lift stations that do not have a building in town. We maintain those without too much problem. And so if you would like to further incentivize these affordable housing developments by not requiring him to build a building, we can find a way to maintain them without a problem. It's just we want to get your approval and let you hear from him before.
Is there any real advantage to building the building?
Well, I think there probably are, and that's why it's in the specifications, but it probably has more to do with security, protection
They almost look
of the
kind of
equipment.
crap. I don't like seeing those buildings out there, just like little bit small buildings.
And that's the idea I think Stuart would tell you is that it probably doesn't fit in with the development he's trying to build. and so he's seeking variance. Rhiannon may be able to speak more to the history of why it's been required, and that's just the way the specifications are currently written. So, do you want to say anything, Stuart? Would you like to hear from him? Or?
Yeah, Rhiannon, is there any reason that you are?
To why we built them. It was in the specifications before I came to the city, but it provides, as Rob mentioned, security for our equipment. It also provides protection from the public. It also provides a place. Some of the pumps are very large, and so we've got specs that require an I-beam in order for them to be able to hoist the lift up. It can't always be done off the side of a pickup truck. And so larger pumps, we need that building, we need that. But it also provides protection from the elements. So when we're called out in a storm, in an event, it provides a place for us to work out of the elements.
So Rhiannon, a flush mounted one though would not be, I mean, I'm assuming it's in the ground or whatever. So, I mean, the security and all the things you're talking about, it wouldn't matter, would it?
I think the controls for the lift station would be mounted on a rack above ground. And I think at the Bell River, they were going to be behind the sign and out of sight. And so that'd be some of the protection there. At the Eastover development, Stuart has suggested that they fabricate a box to go over some of the equipment and some of the pipes so that they're out of sight. And it's also going to be behind the sign is what he's proposing. I'm not sure at Owens Place yet. It'd probably be just like Bell River, since that's Bell River's phase 2, basically. So, does that make sense? I think that.
It does, but I'm just like, Stuart, I can't help you here in the sense that I'm gonna go with whatever our engineers recommend, or Rob or whatever. I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
What size are these pumps? I mean, are they,
So
do they need I-beams?
the Eastover, those Slack Road, which I've already read, those are small pumps. The Eastover pumps are right now sized only for Eastover. They're small. They are actually don't meet the requirements for us to even accept maintenance. But as a previous incentive for affordable housing, we agreed that we would accept the maintenance now. And in the future, the pumps will be upsized because that lift station where it's located will be able to serve much larger additional development. So the pump size will be increased over time. At Eastover, for Owens Place, that also did not meet the requirements for size for us to accept maintenance. After there was an error in how the plans were submitted to MDQ, I was contacted and asked if if the city would consider taking over the maintenance. And basically, they didn't want to misrepresent something to MDQ, and also did not want to misrepresent the city. And so the engineer contacted me and said there was a mistake. How do you want to proceed? And again, as an incentive for affordable housing, I said if it will be built to the city specifications, then I think we would take it, provided it was built. And we discussed the house at that time, and he said yes, it'll be built to city specifications. That one also is in a location where it could eventually be upsized, but right now I think they're small pumps right now. The future long term is.
So is the agreement with DEQ that it has to be built to specification, so it needs to have a shelter? DEQ specification don't require the shelter.
That's our specifications.
And
The notice to DEQ was that the city would be owning and maintaining the lift station, which was not what the city had agreed to. And so that's where they came back to us and said,
Gotcha.
we've had an error, a simple mistake, but what do we do now? And we didn't want to put them in a position of having falsely represented to MDQ. We also were concerned if they went back to MDQ, they may not be granted approval, because MDQ is looking at things a little differently now about private sewer. And so that was also one of the considerations, that I took in when I said, we will agree to maintain these as long as they're built to city.
So, Brianna, when we go to a larger pump and we're maintaining it, will there need to be an I-beam at that point?
I think it depends on, there will be a pump size, yes, that we would need, that we will get to, that we would need, that may not be hoisted off the truck. So I don't know at what point that happens.
That's at the Eastover.
I think it's at
All of them.
Eastover and potentially at, Owens Place too.
So
But I don't know when that
point, would there be enough room to be able to then convert it to a pump
Yeah,
that has?
there would be, and from a developer's perspective, what Rihanna just said is that she helped us a lot because our engineer made some mistakes, first of all, and thank you for that. But there's 3 lift stations that kind of are involved with what I'm doing. Is it at Eastover at the end of Cannon Road, at the entrance to Bell Rivers on Slack Road, but that's a city project. I don't have anything to do with that now. That's the one that was above ground. Now they're all below ground. Like, it's just whether you put something on top. And then in Owens Place, there's one, which is Bell Rivers 2, all the way at the very end. And from a developer's perspective, what I've seen in other jurisdictions is that all lift stations are subsurface now. There's a control panel you gotta put somewhere, but there's even cabinets that you can do for that. A common solution that I've mentioned to Rob that y'all might consider, independent of me, is doing it on a case-by-case basis. Is sometimes those buildings are good and necessary and appropriate, sometimes they're not, and they cost about $50,000. So from an affordable housing perspective, I am saying, can I not build $100,000 in buildings that aren't currently necessary and we don't know when they would be necessary? But for Rob's sake, most utility departments have built into their specifications the ability to make their own decision, not have to ask y'all to say, what's appropriate for here? For instance, the parking garage, right outside the parking garage is a lift station, no building, no structure, and the control panel is sitting there. It's small, but that's me just kind of pulling for Rob and Rihanna to have some more discretion on that. But for me, I am asking to not build those buildings.
Okay. I'm gonna make a motion that we grant the variance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Consider change order number 1 for the North Lamar Park project in the amount of $1,797.28.
So I have 2 items tonight for the, related to the construction of North Lamar Pocket Park. The first is a change order to substitute for coping material for the reflection pool, which is being constructed right now. Originally, we had a 2-inch sandstone coping. Due to the COVID pandemic and a couple other issues, the supplier's unable to source that material, and so I asked the contractor to provide an alternate, and he came up with a limestone product, which can be sourced in Alabama. The result is a change order with an add of $1,797.28. We still are within budget for the project.
All in favor? Any opposed? Consider request for extended work hours for North Lamar Park project.
So this is the second item, extended work hour for 1 day starting tomorrow and running through Friday. They don't know based on weather which day it's going to be right now, but they would like to start at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I have reached out to the adjacent neighbor and talked to her about it, but they have to shoot all the gunite for the reflection pond at one time, and they're going to go all
Sure.
day from 5 until 7.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Mark. Consider change order number 1 for the Bramlett Water Main Upgrade Project for final quantities in the amount of $39,559.80. Rihanna.
So this is our final quantities for our Bramlett project, and it is just cleaning up odds and ends. It's for $39,559.80, and there are adequate funds in the budget for this change order.
All in favor? Any opposed? Consider an amendment to the engineering agreement with W.L. Burley for the wastewater treatment plant flow equalization project. Rihanna?
Yes, our contract is based on the construction price, and we've approved 3 change orders that did increase the construction price and required additional engineering on their part, extensive redesign. So we've requested an amendment for $48,602.24.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? First reading of a proposed ordinance to amend Chapter 42 of the Code of Ordinances regarding flood damage prevention.
Yes. These changes are recommended to us in order to stay compliant with our community ratings system status, and which gives our citizens a decrease in their flood insurance. The amendments are shown on the memo from John Crawley, and it deletes a sentence about substantial damage. It also changes city engineer from building official, so this changes the management of the floodplain from the building official to our office in engineering. And then the last one is to change how you measure for a mobile home. Instead of being able to have it just measured 3 feet off the ground, you've got to have it above the base flood elevation. So this is just a first reading of that ordinance.
All right, any questions for Rihanna? All right, consider change, oh, I'm sorry.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Go back to what base of the flood.
So the,
Is that just for mobile homes? Because there's some homes that get a certificate if they're above the flood elevation. and
yes,
don't have to
so
flood.
this change is just to change how where we allow mobile homes, the elevation we would allow them to be built to. So currently, you either have to have it says above the base flood elevation, or if the chassis is just 3 feet off the ground, which means in reality that you could be lower, and that mobile home could be subject to inundation, and depending on how it's,
So
it's not,
gonna affect flood
it does not,
elevation.
no, it does not. What it really affects is how we will measure, if a mobile home is installed, how we will measure the height that would have to be installed at, and so.
All right, we good? All right, first reading of a proposed ordinance to amend chapter 42 of, no, that's what we just did. Consider change order number 6 for $208,373.90 and 190 days of contract time for the Highway 314 sewer project.
Yes, and this is, as stated for our Highway 13 sewer project, 314, it has been our nightmare project. You've seen me up here several times for additional time related to the delays. The change order tonight, about $56,000 of it is related to a bore, and this is, what it essentially will allow us to do is provide sewer to our annexed areas. When we started this project, these areas were not annexed. Everything was designed before annexation, and so the sewer line is about 18 feet deep in this area. The developer installed and we needed that in order for us to gravity flow, and so for our design, it worked for what we needed. But the developer of the adjacent property has installed his own line that he will turn over to the city in the future, and it's about 7 to 10 feet deep. He had planned to connect to our manhole. We had to relocate it because we could not build it. We never could get the water out. So this bore will allow us to connect to that line that he's installed, and it'll open up sewer to over 100 acres of property in the annexed area. So that's $56,000. And then we've also got other adjustments for final quantities. The project's not complete yet, but these are items that we do feel like we have a good idea on the final quantity for, and a large amount of it is $70,000 is just for backfill. The soil was so bad. We thought as we were doing our excavations that a good portion of the soil could be set to the side and used for backfill. And when we got in there and started working, it's not suitable, and so we couldn't use it. So now we had to haul in extra material. I will point out the total change order is still only about 6.7% increase. It is a very large sum, I don't take that. But over the project, it's an acceptable number as far as what you would see in a typical construction project. The request for contract time includes rain days, and then it includes also days, so they had an extensive delay due to the impacts of COVID. And they notified us in early March that they were already impacted. We basically worked with each project and said, send us your safety plan so we could determine if we would even consider allowing them to work. They notified us early in that they already had been impacted. And so we allowed each contractor to make their own decisions, just as the city did for our workforce, on what was safe, on what they could do. And so that's 77 days of that time. We've got documented rain delays for 65 days, and then we have 48 days for dewatering for this mess. And I will also go ahead and tell you now that we are in discussions and negotiations regarding a change order related to dewatering that would be substantial, that I'll be back next meeting with. They're asking about additional help in the dewatering costs. I've asked them to provide the engineering data to show when we tested all of the engineering that went into the, I know, it's,
Dude.
It is. I can tell you that we've
I know.
got, and that's what we're asking for, the engineering data to support to say, you know, we know that in the last 2 years, we've had more rain. We've you know, substantial rain events, and that's basically feeding these underground aquifers. So I will be coming back to you, but I did want to let you know tonight that is on the horizon. But tonight's request is
So tonight's $208,373.90.
Yes, and it's for the service that we'll use for the annexed areas, and then essentially final quantities on many pay items. So, and there are funds in the water and sewer account for this.
We approve.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
This is all you're getting.
That'll make a short meeting next time.
All in favor? Any opposed? Discuss readdressing and renaming of Annex Street known as County Road 102. Brianna?
Yes. Since the annexation, we've been developing our plan for readdressing our street names. I would like to ask that the first change be for College Hill Road. It happens that I am one of the annexed citizens, and I am one that will have my address changed. This area is a small number of citizens that will be impacted. It will give us a chance to make the change, send out our notification, and explain to the citizens what has to happen, and it'll allow me to firsthand see what all it's going to mean, so that when we come back for future readdressing for our other citizens, I'll know and have a better idea of what it means to them. So I think I noted in the report there are 11 structures in the area, and we are using a new 911, a new addressing system. Our GIS technician brought it to us. It's a national standard, and so it provides addresses. Instead of saying there's one house here and then the next number's, it allows room for growth for added houses, and so.
I move we rename.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you, Rihanna. Authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with the Department of Army for design and construction assistance for the Oxford Regional Water Supply and Treatment Project. Bart.
You get the memo in your packet, and this was the $1.7 million grant we got of 592 funds through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The overall project is just over $2 million. By the time they take their administrative fees out of it, we'll actually get about $1,550,000 out of the grant. What I'd like for you to do is grant the mayor permission to sign the agreement with the Corps, and then we'll set up a formal signing sometime mid-September where the colonel will come up and we'll have a ceremony where the agreement's signed.
Right, so moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? And thank you so much to the Department of Army for design and construction assistance. All right, discuss the allowance of additional sewer connections and subsequent participation in lagoon rehabilitation by Oakmont LLC. Bart?
You've got his proposal in front of you, and I'll just recap briefly. A couple of years ago, when Oakmont and Briarwood were being constructed, we decided the city entered into a development agreement with the developer to only allow a certain number of units to be built, and that was based on design capacity and design flow rates for residential units and for the existing units that were going into that lagoon. Well, they're constructed. We've been monitoring the flow rates we've monitored them forever, but the design flow rates that we're required to use by DEQ is substantially higher than what we're seeing in reality. So they have come back and asked to be able to tie an additional 78 units onto that lagoon at the industrial park. Based on our flow rates, we see no reason not to allow them to do that. We will have to amend the development agreement and work through all of that. There are some issues with the lagoon that we need to address. The developer's part of his proposal is that he covers the cost of those rehabilitation efforts to the lagoon, and the city forego the connection fees, which total about $60,000 for that area. So about $50,000 for those additional 70 units, and which means he'll be out of pocket about an additional $62,000 for the rehabilitation work to that lagoon. If you decide that this is okay and that we will move forward with modifying the development agreement, he will still have to get full approvals from the planning commission. All the plans and the plats for the subdivision will still come back before you, but we just wanted your approval before we move forward.
Yeah, it sounds like a good deal for us. I move we approve it.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Discuss the unopened section of Adams Avenue between North 16th and North 15th Streets and a request to dispose of it as surplus property.
All right, Addy Properties, and you got the memo and maps in your packet, but Addy Properties actually bought the two lots shown on the aerial photograph that's part of your packet in numbered 300 and 301. To the east of there, Adams was already quitclaimed before those condominiums were built. It was quitclaimed in 92. I think the condominiums were probably built around 2000, 99 or 2000. Since that time, we have changed the way we look at quitclaiming these properties, and we have determined that we acquired this property for the right-of-way in fee simple, which means we have to dispose of it as through the surplus property method, which means we either had to take sealed bids, or we go through the two appraisal process and take the average of the two appraisal, the method we've used more often. In this instance, if we take sealed bids, there's nobody else that probably bids, because it's only valuable to the person who owns the property on both sides of it. In this case, it's the same person. So I recommend that if you decide to declare it surplus, that you make the finding that it's in the cultural, social, and economic best interest of the city to get two appraisals and go that method, and authorize us to hire the appraisers. We will do that. We would come back to you with a resolution as soon as that's completed, and move forward with deeding transferring the deed of the property.
With the first motion, like tonight, would just be to authorize an appraisal.
Authorize appraisals.
Do we go ahead and authorize two appraisals?
Yes, sir, please.
I move we authorize two appraisals. Hey, what's somebody's parking a car on city property down there, it looks like to me.
Second.
All in favor? Any
They
opposed?
definitely work.
Yeah.
But it's a street.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, and next on our agenda is to discuss parking spaces for outdoor dining options.
And I
Art?
tried to offer you a bullet point list of the steps we would have to take to move forward. We got our second appraisal. The average of the two appraisals ended up meaning each parking space is valued at about $192.50 per month. So tonight, if you want us to move forward, I guess the first thing you have to do is determine that the spaces are surplus under the current conditions. And I think when I say current conditions, I mean under COVID and the way people are using the square now. And typically you can look outside my window now and you can see empty parking spaces. I can tell you, a year ago, that wasn't the case on an afternoon. Then you have to make the same findings that I just discussed under the previous item, that it's in the cultural and social and economic best interest of the city to lease those spaces to the restaurants. And then we would come back in as quickly as possible, or then determine the time. 3 months, I think, is what we've talked about, and that gets us to where we get to some pretty cold weather that maybe we won't be able to use them. And then will you allow us to provide our bicycle rack type barriers for the parking spaces? If you believe that's the method we go forward with, we will set a meeting up as quickly as possible with the restaurateurs to see how many takers we have on it. We would get the leases drafted, and we'd come back to you with the leases and the resolution as quickly as possible, hopefully at the next meeting. That seems pretty aggressive, but that's what our goal is.
And the only thing I would add is part of doing that lease, there are gonna be some other requirements on the restaurants, like maybe including us as an additional insured, but anyway, this doesn't get to those specifics, but they'll be in the lease.
I made a comment to another alderman a day or two ago about this, and I said, we could spend all day going over all the different things, different issues, but I said the mayor and her team are really good and Bart at figuring out what needs to be done. And if I'm all for it. If y'all want to spend the time to get this thing done,
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
I think it's important with our restaurants hurting like they are right now. I think it's, number one, important to find any way we can to support our local businesses. And I also believe that outdoor dining is much more safe than indoor dining. So if we have the opportunity to provide that outdoor space and we have available parking for the next 3 months, it certainly seems like something that we should offer.
And we're getting ready to hit the time of year where maybe two of the only 4 months of the year in Mississippi that you could.
That's
that you
right.
could eat outside.
And so what Bart and I would plan to do, if you all approve and we go through this list of things and you approve of those things, is tomorrow we would reach out to all of the restaurant owners in the downtown district. And then on Thursday, we would try to meet with them to see how many are interested. You know, we're not positive how many folks will be interested in doing this. A couple of things that I think are important for everybody to note is we're only talking about downtown businesses because those are or downtown restaurants, because those are places that don't have their own parking spaces to utilize. So restaurants across the city could implement this same outdoor dining, but they would be doing it on their private properties. They could do that all the time. You know, I mean, this would not be something that they would do just whenever. I mean, they are allowed to do that. So that's why we are talking about it for the downtown areas, because they would specifically need to use city-owned property. But I've gotten that question a lot, so I just wanted to make sure everybody understood. It's not that we are saying other areas can't do it. They could already be doing it. So, and I think some are. But if you all agree to these things, then Bart and I will get all of the restaurant owners together along with Kenny and our Visit Oxford crew. They've been very helpful through this, and
What type of
see who's
motion do you-
interested.
Just that you are, just to let us know that you're willing to declare it surplus and allow us to move forward preparing leases and getting ready to come back to you at the next meeting. I do want to point out though, lastly, that if every restaurant down here that could possibly take care of it, take this opportunity, realizing some cannot because they're either on too steep a slope or something that just wouldn't be viable, that we're talking about 48 spaces. That's if everybody does it. And I just.
Does it have to be, I guess it's a question, I didn't think about this until you said the too steep, but does it have to be right in front of the place? I guess what I'm getting at is, could someplace like the Tallahatchie Gourmet that's on a steep, could they go and take 2 spaces right in front of Nelson's?
I think they could, maybe under what we're looking at, but that's not very practical.
But
and they're delivering.
This would be the other thing that I would ask. They have to handle this with ABC themselves. ABC has told us that they would make application to ABC that would enlarge their footprint of their permitted area. I'm not sure.
I got you. I was just thinking, can people, like, I don't even know, you could say Proud Larry's, they may not want to be right in front of them on that street. They might want to be on the square.
Well, they can if ABC is going to extend their.
Yeah.
But it just depends on how ABC looks at it. They may consider extending, just giving them some extra space.
Yeah, I've not talked to ABC to investigate any of
In the
that.
lease too, and this is part of the thing.
Because if they're extending their space, they're going across the sidewalk.
But they're.
Is that not correct?
It is.
But the restaurateur.
And they can't do it on the sidewalk.
Has to follow all of our alcohol rules and regulations too. So they're responsible with policing it. They're responsible with cleaning it up. All that will be spelled out.
I think if they were in a different area, John, it would require them to have staff that will be standing right there at those spots.
Right.
And when we're only talking about 2 spots per restaurant, you're looking at 4 to 6 tables maybe, and they'll just have to determine what makes sense for them financially. I think that some will take advantage and some will not. An interesting conversation that I had the other day, I shared with Janice. I did a Zoom meeting with a group called the Wise Women, and I was telling them about this idea and how we were trying to facilitate some outdoor dining. And I said that I was concerned, we had hoped that we'd be able to make a donation at least, or a cheaper rent for these spaces, and that we've asked for an Attorney General's opinion, don't have one yet. And they said, well, perhaps the restaurants that are interested, we could do an Adopt a Restaurant program, like an Adopt a Highway program, and contribute to help them pay for those extra spaces, which I thought was a just fabulous, generous idea on their behalf. So I'll mention that to the restaurants that are interested, that they may reach out to them to try to move that forward. So I think that it is at least an offer we can make that I think some restaurants will take advantage of, and it'll help them.
Well, I think we need to specify that the spaces are surplus.
Declare them surplus and authorize us to move forward with.
And that the cultural, social, and economic, it's in the
best interest, yeah.
Social, cultural, economic best interest of the city.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
And that they will be leased for a 3-month, I want to make sure y'all are all good with this, that we would lease them for a 3-month
Yeah.
period, and that we would allow them to use our metal barriers that we have, that look kind of like bicycle racks, to define their actual spaces. We will ask restaurant owners, they will have to comply with all of our alcohol rules, and will have to facilitate the permit extensions from ABC. I did, I know it, I'm funny like that. Okay, so that's Jason's motion, is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you. I would ask the board to now consider an executive session.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? The board will now consider an executive session.
No, it doesn't matter.